Welcome to We Are Menifee. I'm your host, Richard Sandoval, and a few weeks back I sat down with the City Manager of Menifee, Armando G. We talked about the effect the pandemic had on our city, parks, the movie theater, and the status of the Holland Overpass project. We begin our conversation discussing the challenges of developing a police department during the pandemic.
Thank you for asking. That's a very good question because it was probably one of the most challenging things that I've ever done and that we have ever done, attempting to start up our own police department through the pandemic. We did have a lot of setbacks. As you know, when you hire one police officer, you probably have to interview like 30 police officers to be able to get to that one that you're going to hire. And having to hire 60 police officers in less than 1 year means that you have to do a lot of interviews. And when you have to do interviews via Zoom and you have to do interviews and be able to judge character, is very difficult. And then one of the most difficult things that we had to do is try to get records from other city halls when they were closed. So trying to get their background checks done in time was proved to be very challenging. But we did end up hiring 60 officers, and we did start our own police department July 1st of 2020.
This is actually my first in-person interview in over a year. And I thought it was going to be important that we kind of come out to a location in the city that I know was in the news a couple of months ago. And the topic, we're actually here on Holland and Hahn Road. Can you talk about this specific project going forward and maybe dispelling some myths? Give us some facts about what's going to go on in the future here on Holland, the Holland Overpass.
Yeah. Well, Richard, you're full of good questions today. Because the second most important thing that we've done is to put together a lot of effort, a lot of energy into completing this project. We've heard the community loud and clear. They've been talking to us about the problems, the frustrations about traffic that they've had over the last several years. And I know that over the last 5 years, we've spent a lot of money building infrastructure to be able to deal with the traffic issues. And one of the things that I want to make sure that everybody understands is that the traffic that we have is not because the city is creating the traffic, it's the whole region is actually creating this traffic. A lot of our traffic is passed by traffic from one city to the other city. So what we've done is we spent a lot of money and resources and energy into completing Newport Road, the bridge, completing Scott Road and the bridge, and soon Scott Road widening to alleviate that traffic that comes from other cities that pass by our city. We're lucky to be situated geographically in the middle of everything, so everybody has to go through our city to go somewhere. But one of the most also important projects that we're working on is Holland Road Overpass. As you know, Holland Road is going to be used primarily by a lot of our local residents to bypass and as a shortcut to be able to go from one side of the city to the other side of the city, and also to enjoy the amenities that we have here on this side of the city and the amenities that we have on the other side of the city. We are going to be building a 4-lane road with sidewalks, bike paths, well lit, two traffic signals on both ends, on Hanover and on Hahn Road. So it'll be fully built to be able to allow residents to take a shortcut and not have to go through Newport or Scott Road. And this year we're very happy because we completed probably the most important milestone, which is the funding that's necessary to be able to complete the project. You can't go out to bid on a project. You can't go out and get permits on a project if you can't prove and demonstrate to the approving agencies that we have the funding to do it. And this year, the council took one very important action a couple of weeks ago by approving the last portion of the funding that's necessary to be able to put this $31 million project together.
Speaking of money, so it is funded, which also kind of brings up a next question too, is I know that the state legislature just passed a bill. How is our projects, how's our city doing funding wise with the latest budgets?
Well, let me tell you a little bit about first the Holland Road budget, because a lot of the budget that we used from regional transportation agencies and regional agencies to help us deal with the traffic issues. So this year, a big chunk of that funding, about $8 million worth of money, came from WRCOG, which is a regional agency that's tasked to implement the TUMF program. So we're getting about $8 million from them this year. And then let's not forget about Measure DD, the quality of life Measure DD. It really closed the gap. Measure DD is funding, I think, about $3.2 million worth of funding to be able to close the gap on this project. So we're taking advantage of a whole bunch of pockets of money to be able to build this bridge. It doesn't come from one funding source. And that's kind of the challenging aspect of putting together a project this large, is making sure you take advantage of the timing and the funding availability to build this project this large. This project has about 5 funding sources, and together they comprise about almost $32 million worth of funding. So on the state front, we know that the state has excess funding. So we are tasking our staff to be able to be knocking on doors at the California Transportation Commission, at the Riverside County Transportation Commission, so that they know we're here and that they know that we have a lot of infrastructure projects to be built to date, right? And and also at the federal level, let's not forget that Congressman Calvert has pledged a little over, I want to say, $18 million for 2 projects in our city, and we're starting to see some really good signs that money is going to be funded through the federal legislation.
Federal legislation, just so we're clear, is that part of the infrastructure program that the Biden administration is?
It is part of the federal budget, and as you know, the federal budget, a big chunk of it is deals with infrastructure to be able to put Americans back to work.
Right.
And they're still debating on that, but one funding source that we're taking advantage of is the community project funding congressional district. This year, Congressman Calvert has pledged about $5 million for us to be able to fund the construction of Bradley Bridge, which is another project that I hope to be talking to you about it, because we, with that funding opportunity, we should be able to close the funding gap here pretty soon for that project.
I play softball. A lot of my friends play softball here in our community and enjoy our parks. I know you've had a lot of improvements. But I specifically want to talk about the relationship between, and maybe some people don't even understand this. We have the City of Menifee, we have parks on this side, and we have Valleywide. Can you talk a little bit about that relationship? I know that there was some litigation later on and what have you, but kind of bring me up to speed, if you will, as a consumer, as a resident of these that enjoys our parks.
Yeah. Well, the fact that we were in litigation proves to the public that we disagreed with their approach. A lot of our residents continue to complain about the fact that our parks on the west side of the freeway look really nice, and the fact that the parks on the east side of the freeway, they're not as nice. And, the city doesn't have a landscaping assessment. We do have a citywide assessment, but it's not as much as it is on the other side. And we want to be able to control the look of those parks on the east side. We did put an application together to LAFCO. It was granted, and we just disagree with the conditions of approval. It just proved to be too burdensome for the city and the residents of Menifee to absorb. So we ended up in litigation over those 2 conditions, and when it was all said and done, the judge found that we needed to apply again. So because of the time that lapsed, and I just feel that the city as a whole didn't suffer. Who suffered is the residents on the east side, because now they have to endure having to play in parks that are not up to standard to our other parks. But we're going to try again. Our city council is very eager to begin the process again, because they really want to be able to have one approach to maintenance of all parks. We really need one standard. We don't need two standards, and we really need residents to pay less. And that's kind of the bottom line here.
I wouldn't be doing my job, both as a journalist and as a resident, if I didn't ask, what's going on with this theater?
Yeah, that's probably the subject of a lot of conversations. You know, a lot of people think that the city of Menifee is the one that's building the theater, right? So we are not. We are a permitting agency, and the theater is a private venture. It is being funded by private monies. And as you know, with the pandemic, banks really pulled back, and the investor for the theater lost his funding because of the pandemic. A lot of banks really pulled back their funding. So he's been struggling to talk to the banks about reopening that. Now, over the last several months, we have had very positive conversations with the owner. Okay. And it seems like the banks are opening up their wallet, and you know, but even if the banks cut him a check right now, the problem with the theater industry is that there's no movies out there, so there's no product to show. Right. During the pandemic, very few studios were producing movies, so you really need to have a good portfolio of movies to be able to have a successful theater. So I believe, based on our conversations with the operator, that in the next 6 months, we're going to start going again. He's going to start building it again. And then by the time he opens, which we hope is in the next 6 months to 9 months, that there'll be product for him to show at the movie theater.
Okay. So bottom line is, it's still happening. And we still don't know specifically when I can walk up and buy a ticket and enjoy some great air conditioning inside a movie theater.
Right. So what we heard from the operator is that he's very eager to get started. He just got to clear a couple of hurdles with the banks. It's not a cheap project. It's a very expensive project, very complicated project, and the banks are still going through the setbacks from the COVID-19. So I'm very hopeful, and every time we have conversations with him, he's very positive about telling us, I'm very close. I'm very close.
How are we? And you mentioned the Bradley project, or there's some other projects that we need to talk about that you'd like to share with our viewers?
Well, Richard, that's a very good question, because I have good news for the residents of Menifee and the public. You know, over the last 4 years, we have doubled our budget. Our revenues have been steady, and it's not because they just happen. We've been putting together some strategies to make sure that we diversified our revenue streams, and they're working. We focus on developers, contributions. We focus on retail. We focus on permits, and also we focus on marketing. Obviously, you know, when businesses want to locate in an area, what do? They go to Google. So we work really hard to make sure that we improved our media presence on social media and the internet, to where now we become a very, very desirous city. You know, we really took the task to make sure that we illustrated to the investors that Menifee was a good place is a good place to invest, and that's paying off. To where now, you know, our budget, our revenue has gone from about $40 million to about $75 million now. Over the last 3 years, we've hired over 200 employees to be able to keep up with demand, and that has allowed us to provide better services to the community. And let's not forget about starting the police department. Just that department alone was about 100 employees. And when it comes to economic development, you can't sell a good economic development strategy if you're not a safe city. And one of our city council's primary goals in our strategic plan is to continue to be a safe city, one of the safest cities in California. So we're doing extremely well. We're doing some very prudent spending, and we're putting a lot of money aside for a rainy day as well. So, you know, I see good things for Menifee.
Thank you so much for watching this edition of We Are Menifee. If you have story ideas, send us a note on our Facebook page. Until next time, I would like to encourage you to support our local businesses and be a good neighbor.